Hi everybody, it's Nikki here and welcome to a bookish video. So today's video is my January reading wrap-up, which is where I talk about all the books that I read in the month of January. So normally I do my statistics at the beginning of the video. However, the way that I'm taking my statistics now means I'm accumulating more information, and some of that information will actually give you spoilers to the books that I read. So you'll understand what I mean when I get to the statistics, but I'm going to start doing those at the end of the video once I've shown you all the books and you won't be spoiled from what books I've been reading. So let's get into the first book that I finished in January, and I actually started this at the end of December 2021. Obviously, it was 2021, it wasn't going to be 2022, it didn't take me a year to finish this. But anyway, I started this book at the end of December, but didn't quite finish it. So it ended up being the first book I finished in January. So that is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. I really wanted to read this. I was so excited for the synopsis of this. And let me tell you, it did not let me down. So this got a 5 stars from me. I would definitely say if you like Holly Black's The Cruel Prince, you will love this because their storylines are very similar. So our main character goes into the fairy world to try to rescue her sister, and she gets involved with the fae. And it's a romance. And it's a love triangle. So my notes... Tried to be more organised, I did not. So my notes on this say, great ending, good love triangle, fae story similar to The Cruel Prince. So yeah, I felt like this was very similar to The Cruel Prince, but a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more plot and a little bit more, like, I kind of feel like I know where The Cruel Prince was going, whereas with this one I wasn't 100% sure. There's more than one love interest, so as I say, there is a love triangle, and I don't know which one I want her to be with. And that's strange, because normally with a love triangle you're kind of like, well, I really want her to be with that person, but in this one I don't know which one I want her to be with. I have a feeling I know which one she might go with though. But yes, I loved the ending of this, so much so that I immediately looked for when the sequel of this was coming out, because this is a Fairy Loot special edition that I got last year. And I have to wait till November. I have to wait till November. I have to wait for November for the following book in this series. So I'm so excited for it. I have put it on my anticipated release spread in my bullet journal so that I know in November to go and pick this up. I obviously probably won't go for the Fairy Loot special edition. If they do a special edition of the sequel, I'll just get it from Waterstones or somewhere. But yeah, if you like The Cruel Prince, if you like human fae love triangles, you're gonna really enjoy this. So that was my first book I read. The next book I read was not on my TBR at all. I purchased this in January and I read it as soon as it arrived. It is The Panda, the Cat and the Dreadful Teddy, which is a parody by Paul Mags. This is simply a parody for The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. I think that's the name of the book. That I read last year and absolutely loved. The Boy, the Fox, the Mole, the Horse, it's in one of those orders, is basically a beautiful story that really speaks to your mental health heart, and it makes you feel stronger and like you can do this, and it's really an uplifting story. This, however, it doesn't take the mick and it doesn't take the piss, and it's not making fun of the boy and the mole and the fox and the horse, whatever it is. It just kind of is more of the British sense of humour, I want to say. So it says, For example, and this isn't a spoiler because it's written on the back there, it says, if you don't stop saying inspirational things to me, I'm going to punch you up the hooter. And that's basically the humour of this book. It's like, yes, we all sometimes need inspirational thoughts and words, but sometimes we just need someone to be plain straight up with us and say, yeah, it is a bit shit. Life is hard. You're right. You should break down and cry, and that's okay. And this book kind of does that. So for me personally, with my mental health, I do love to have people say inspirational things to me, but I also like people to be straight up with me and just say, Nicola, you're being stupid. And this book kind of does that. So I feel like the artwork in here was also amazing. My notes on this says, funny, lots of swearing, my husband wants to read it. And I also gave this 5 stars as well. So yeah, when I showed my husband this and I read the back to him, he was like, can I read that after you? And you know what? Any book that from simple words on the back of it make my husband want to read it gets a 5 stars from me straight away, because my husband is sadly not a reader. He's much more into his computer games and watching footy and, you know, and that sort of thing. But yeah, if it can make my husband sit down and want to read a book, then, you know. He hasn't as of yet because it's been sat in my TBR cart waiting for this video to be finished, but once it is finished, I can take it downstairs to him and he can pick it up at his own leisure. But yeah, highly recommend if you are struggling with your mental health and when people are like trying to be inspirational to you and all of that, and you're just sat there going, go away. Then maybe this book might be more up your alley, because sometimes it's not that kindness that we need. It's more somebody just going, oh, shut up. Just get on with it kind of thing. Which I know sounds harsh, but sometimes it makes you sit back and go, yeah, I should just get up and brush myself off and carry on. Life isn't all doom and gloom after all. But yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. The next book I read, I can't remember if this was on my TBR or not, but it was Heartstopper volume, which one am I up to? Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. I gave this one 3 stars. I do like this graphic novel. 3 stars is a, yeah, I enjoyed it, I'm glad I read it kind of score for me. It's not, there are some more sort of underlying issues being raised in this one. The hardship of coming out to friends and family and to the general public. You know, it's all right with your closest and close friends, but coming out to like the general public and your family and that is a little bit harder, and this does sort of deal with those situations, and it also touches a little with an eating disorder as well. My notes on this say, good artwork, good story, dealing with worries of coming out to family and friends, trigger warning for eating disorders. So it does have that, but it's in such a sort of non-dramatic way. It's not like high drama, you know, with like some of the other books, you're like edge of your seat, kind of like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? This isn't that. It's just kind of like soft and gentle, barely does it. And even when there is conflict, I feel like it's almost put down straight away, as if almost this was written in the way that we wish the world would respond to these issues, rather than how sadly some of the world does deal with these issues. So yeah, I don't think it's as hard hitting as I would prefer it to be. It's just very sweet, and I'm more of a angst kind of dramatic kind of reader. I want drama, I want passion. And these are kind of like sweet and adorable and cute and nice, and I think that's why it just doesn't hit hard with me. Yeah, I know people love these though. I know people love these, so don't let my review of them put you off reading them, because they are good books. The artwork in them is nice. I believe that this story is available online. I don't know where. I'm sure there are people who know and could possibly put something in the comments. So if you do know where you're able to get this online, please let me know. But I prefer to read them in book form. So yeah, that's that one. The next one I read was a classic, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I gave this 3 stars, and my notes on this say, comforting, charming, wholesome, one of my favourite films from childhood, but the 1949 version with June Allison. Yes, I actually watched the newer version of Little Women just after I read this one, because I was in the mood for it, and it was the one with Emma somebody, Hermione from Harry Potter. That female actress, I can't, her life has completely gone out of my head. Her name, sorry, her name has gone completely out of my head, I'm sorry. But Emma somebody plays in the film, the newest film of this. And I was not a fan. I mean, it's a good film, but I like the old film better. Yeah, this was, again, very charming, very sweet. It is basically about the life and growing up and falling in love of 4 sisters, and some of the dramas that go along with, you know, falling out with your sisters and losing a sister, and, you know, all the drama that goes with that, alongside their father being at war and only having their mother to look after them. It's a difficult time for everybody and trying to help out everybody in the community. Yeah, I think though I'd rather watch the film than read the book again. I did give it 3 stars. I didn't feel anything special about it, to be honest. So yeah, not a new favourite classic, unfortunately, but I will keep reading classics to try and see if any can beat Dracula. The next one I read was my buddy read with Charlotte, and that was Graceling by Kristen Cushaw. I really enjoyed this one. This one I gave 4 stars, and my notes say great plot and characters, but needs more detail in the world building and great twists in the plot. Yeah, I felt like this one, nearly smacked myself in the head then. I felt like this one was kind of lacking in world building. Like, I couldn't imagine this world that they were in. I didn't really visualise where they were at, because I just felt like it was lacking in description. Like, we were told that they were in the mountains, but it didn't describe, you know, how cold and bare and rough the mountain was. It didn't really go into much detail about the characters. Clothing, we got everything. In clothing, we got described what they were wearing, what colour everything was, but in the environment that they were in, not so much. So I just felt like it was lacking a few details, like a little bit of polish. That's what I think it was lacking. Just that little finishing touches that would have made this a 5-star read. I think because we are so spoiled with such great books coming out now, that this one that came out, in 2008, it kind of shows. It kind of shows that storytelling has evolved in the 12 years since, well, 14 years since 2022 now, Nicola. So yeah, I just felt like this needed a bit more polish to finish it off, and it would have been a 5 stars. I was umming and ahhing about 4 or 5 stars because I really did enjoy it. And in fact, I flew through this, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the second book. But yeah, it was a really simple, easy read, so glad I read it. The next book I read was another new book that I bought in January, but I bought this specifically for my Bookgammon TBR because I didn't have a book to fulfill the prompt, which was to read a hardback in non-fiction. So I bought Greek Myths, Meet the Heroes, Gods and Monsters of Ancient Greece, written by Jean Menzies and illustrated by Katie Ponder, and this is published by DK. This I gave 4 stars. I did really enjoy this. I kind of picked this up and flicked through a couple of pages at a time. There's some of the artwork in there. Just, you know, awesome artwork. My notes on this says, simple, easy to read, great artwork, easy to reference, and enjoyed the pronunciation guide and glossary. Yes, at the back this has, as I say, a punctuation or pronunciation guide. So you have all your Greek gods and characters and mythical creatures and stuff, and then also a glossary at the back as well. I massively appreciated that because the number of times I've started to read a Greek myth story and I've come across a weird name and I'm like, how do I pronounce that? I know I'm slaughtering it. Why? So I absolutely love it when books like this include a pronunciation guide, because if they're not normal names like Greg, Bob and Sally, I do struggle a bit. It's my northern accent, my northern British accent. I can't, I can't do it. So, but yes, I really love this. This is a book that I think a lot of younger children would really love to help get them into ancient Greek myths and legends, because it really does tell you the story in a very simplistic way. It doesn't shy away from being gruesome, if I can say that word in a children's book. It doesn't shy away from the fact that some of these stories do have some gruesome parts to them. It doesn't shy away from the fact that sometimes Zeus was not a nice guy and he took what he wanted plenty of times. But it tells it in such a way that it's not graphic for the kids, and that they understand and know what is happening, but it's not aggressively told. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't be concerned. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And this is a book that I will probably come back and reference whenever I pick up a retelling in a fantasy book about a particular Greek myth. So if I pick up a Hades and Persephone retelling, I can come into this book, reread that section on Hades and Persephone and how they came to be together to rule the underworld, and then I will be able to understand and connect better with the fantastical retelling book that I pick up. So yeah, I'm really glad that I purchased this, and I do highly encourage people to just pick this up if you're interested in Greek myths, because it is told in such a simple but fantastic, beautifully presented way. And big kudos to Jean Menzies, because I believe she is a bookish YouTuber, but she is also very well educated in what she's talking about, and I believe she teaches at a university as well, so you know, she knows her stuff. and it shows. So yeah, really happy to have had this. The next one I read, I'm not going to spend too long on this because it makes me uncomfortable. So the story of Dr. Doolittle by Hugh Lofting. If you don't know, I asked in my TBR, Bookgammon TBR video, if you knew what this character was. It is called a Push Me Pull You, because it pushes and pulls. So I thought, because I've watched the old-fashioned film, you know, from the 1950s or whatever, that this was just a cute story about a doctor who is a very bad human doctor, and so turns his hand at being a animal doctor, and he can talk to animals. On reading this, however, the story is a product of its time. It was written in originally 1922, and it got a 2 stars from me. Let me see my notes just to remind myself what I said. Well, that was quick because I did listen to this on audiobook, and it was basically a 2.5 hour audiobook, so that's why that was there. Simple story, but wonder if it goes deeper than it seems. That was my original thoughts. And then I actually looked into it, and it was like, trigger warning for racial slurs and skin whitening. Yeah. So, it makes my skin crawl. I will be unhauling this. I don't need this on my shelves. I don't need to reread it. I've read it once. You know, it is what it is. It's a product of its time, but it's no longer necessary in today's age. And after finishing reading that and coming to the realization that I'm gonna come across that the more classics I read, because of the times that they were written, I'm going to come across racism in probably quite a few classics, unfortunately, because it was more acceptable back then, and it makes my skin crawl because it's no longer acceptable, and I don't want to read that stuff. So it makes me a little bit nervous about picking up more classics. But then again, I do have quite a few on my shelves. This is my classic shelf here, this black spot here, and then the shelf above it there. So I do have quite a few more classics to read, and in general I do enjoy them. But when they come with touch of racism in there, it makes my skin crawl, and I don't like it. So yes, there was that. Okay, the next book. Okay, so I forgot that this book was coming out in January. Don't know how, because I've been anticipating this book forever. And then I was scrolling through Twitter, and somebody had posted a picture saying that they'd bought their copy and they were reading it and they were already enjoying it. And I immediately came off Twitter, phoned my local Waterstones, asked them for the book. They said, yep, it's just come in today. I'll put one aside for you. And then I literally sent my husband into town. Not that day, sadly, it was too late. But the very next day, he went and picked it up. I'm talking, of course, of A Thunder of Monsters by S.A. Patrick. This is the 3rd and final book in the Songs of Magic trilogy. And oh my God, yes! So this is the 3rd and final book to, as I say, the Songs of Magic trilogy, which starts with A Darkness of Dragons. I love that first book. I love the second book, A Vanishing of Griffins. Need I say, can you guess what score I gave it? 5 stars because I loved this book so much. I dropped my TBR straight away as soon as my husband came home, handed me the book. I dropped whatever book I was reading at the time and I just picked this up because I needed to read it. I had to read it. I loved it so much. So of course this was 5 stars. My notes say laughed, cried, gasped, cheered, a promise for more. Yeah, because in the acknowledgements at the back, which I always try to read, it does say that possibly it says, as Ren learns to become a powerful shape-shifting sorcerer and Patch finds he has some surprising new talents, I know that Bava will always be there to keep an eye on things. And who knows, maybe one day we'll meet again. Who knows, maybe one day we'll meet again. And so I tweeted, because I can just about do that, I tweeted S.A. Patrick to say, are we getting more in the Songs of Magic stories? And he said, never say never, basically. He replied to my tweet. I fangirled for a while. S.A. Patrick knows I love his books. So yes, and I asked about a particular character from the second book who was kind of missing in this book, but he said it's okay, they are happy and safe, and well loved, so don't worry about that character. I'm not going to say who because I don't want to spoil it, but I loved it so much. If you like dragons and the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin and magic and friendship and acknowledging that everybody has their own story to tell. A lot of the times we have main characters in books and then the side characters really are just there to help the first main character finish their plot. But in these books, in the Songs of Magic trilogy, each character has their own story to tell and each one is getting page time to tell that story. And that's what I love about this trilogy the most, is no character is a secondary character. This is a story about 3 main characters. They're all good friends. And yes, there are side characters around them, but this is a story about 3 people, not just about the chosen one or, you know, the girl next door or, you know, so this is a story for lots of people and I love it. I love it so much. And I so want to read this trilogy again from the start. Have I gushed about it enough yet, do you think? I love it. I love it so much, and I highly recommend the trilogy of Songs of Magic. As I say, first book is The Darkness of Dragons, second book, A Vanishing of Griffins, third book, Thunder of Monsters. But that's that one done. The next book I read was actually my ebook, and if I get my thing up, it was Gilded by Marissa Mayer, and this is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and basically my notes on this say Rumpelstiltskin retelling with romance, great villain you love to hate, great ending, can't wait for the sequel. I wonder if this was the one that comes out in November and maybe not these Hollow Vows. I think this was the one that comes out in November. So Gilded, I gave 4 stars. I absolutely loved this story. You have this girl who basically like lies in a very bragging kind of way. It's something that she was kind of born with, I suppose. And her bragging one day gets her into trouble and she is taken away and asked to spin straw into gold, but of course she can't. And so this mysterious boy turns up and he helps her to spin the straw into gold. And I really, really liked the way that the story was manipulated around the original fairy tale. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait for the sequel. So yeah, I'm also possibly eyeing up purchasing a physical copy of this book as well, because I did read it on ebook, but part of me is kind of really wanting to own the physical copy. So that to me says how much I actually really enjoyed this book. The next book I read was my husband pick from my Bookgammon TBR, and that was The Invisible Life of Addy Larue by V.E. Schwab. My score on this was 4 stars, scores. And my notes say, unexpected twist on a love story, but really enjoyed it. I don't think I fell in love with this as much as other people seem to do. Other people are like raving that this is the be all and end all of books, but I didn't get that feeling. I don't know if it's because I listened to it on audiobook rather than read it physically, that I missed some of the atmosphere maybe. I do feel like I want to reread this in the future, but physically next time, because I did read it audibly. I always have a look, every time I have my TBR for the month, I always go through and see which books are available as audiobooks on Scribd, so that I know which books I can listen to while doing other things. And this was one of them, so that's why this got picked to be an audio read rather than a physical read. But I do think it's going to benefit from a physical read later on. It was a good story, and I did like the way that the twist within the story worked. This girl who makes a deal with some kind of darkness, devil kind of character, in order to escape an arranged marriage. But it means that she's never remembered. So as soon as she leaves somebody's sight, they literally forget who she is. And then one day she meets somebody who remembers, and, you know, she's drawn to that person because suddenly, you know, she can have a relationship almost with somebody, because prior to that, the moment she walks out, they don't remember that she's part of their lives. So yeah, I did like it. This has one of those endings that I always wish I wanted in a book. And then I got it in this, and I was kind of like, huh, it's not as satisfying as I thought it was going to be. But again, I don't know if that's because I listened to it on audio and I didn't have the atmosphere, the close connection as physically reading it. So yeah, I think this is going to have to be a reread in the future. But I did give it 4 stars, so I did enjoy it. I didn't feel connected to it, and I didn't feel that emotional draw that I've heard so many people talk about. So yeah, also as well, I think sometimes when people have really, really hyped a book and then it doesn't quite hit that with you, it kind of leaves you with this empty void feeling that you're missing something that everybody else has noticed. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this. So that's that one. The next book I read was again another ebook. We'll go back to my BorrowBox app, which is my library's Borrow app, and it's The Lost Sisters by Holly Black. Now this is the Fog of the Air book 1.5, I believe. So it comes after The Cruel Prince, but before The Wicked King. And I gave this 2 stars. It was a very short ebook. It was only 32 pages. That's how short this book was. And my notes say, short and not entirely necessary. Doesn't add anything to the story. Yeah, this book basically kind of tells part of the Cruel Prince story from the main character's sister's point of view. I forget her name. What was her name? Taryn. From Taryn's point of view instead of Jade's point of view. They're twin sisters, and the Lost Sisters is part of the story told from Taryn's point, because we get it from Jade's point of view in The Cruel Prince. But it didn't really add anything more to the story. Now, I have been told that this short story was included in the Barnes and Noble special edition of The Cruel Prince or The Wicked King, one of the two, probably The Cruel Prince. Whereas I don't have that in my edition of The Cruel Prince. So if this short story had been in my Cruel Prince edition, I might have been a little bit more kind of like, oh, that was a good story to read. But on its own, it's not worth your 10 minutes to read it, to be fair. It really isn't. And that's really all it took, was about 10-15 minutes to read the 32 pages. Not long at all. By the time I sort of said, ooh, I'm reading this, I'd finished it. So yeah, that was 2 stars for that one. The next book I read was The Forest of Souls by Laurie M. Lee. I gave this one 3 stars, and my notes on this was, felt lacking in details to confirm what we were told to be true or happening. An interesting ending. Yeah, I felt very much the same way with this one as I felt about Graceling. I felt like we were told a lot, but I didn't really see the details there to back up what we were being told. I feel like with a bit more detail and with a bit more showing rather than telling, this would have been so much better. I mean, it got 3 stars and I did really like the story, and I am interested enough to look at the second book and pick that up and read that. But yeah, I just felt like I was missing something. Once again, I just felt like I did read this physically, so it's not like I missed the connection because I was reading it audibly. I did read this physically, but I just felt like I wanted more. I got to the end of this and I was like, I don't feel like I got the whole story, you know? So I don't know. I don't know when the sequel is out or if it's already out. But I'm definitely interested in picking it up and seeing where the story goes from here. Because I did really enjoy the story of this girl who is secretly training to be the Queen's assassin. And she's a supposedly nobody because she doesn't know where she doesn't know her parents. She was an orphan. Only to find out that she's actually a bit of a somebody, very important somebody, and everyone's kind of after her now. So I did enjoy that. I did enjoy the magic system, and there was one character in here who I thought might be a potential love interest, but then it wasn't really delved into. So if you don't like romance in your stories, you might enjoy this because there was none. There was a character in here who, as I say, I was kind of hoping there would be some romance, but nothing happened. They were just friends. So yeah, it has potential. I will say that it has potential. The next book I read, I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared because I asked at my Waterstones to look for the 3rd book in this series that is due to come out in February, and the lady in Waterstones could not find it on their system, and I was really worried that they weren't going to be able to get it in, so I've left it in her hands to look for me but otherwise I might have to go to Amazon for this. But I read The Jade Bones by Lainey Forbes, which is the second book in the Seventh Son series. The third book, The Obsidian Butterfly, is due out this February, this month. And I really need it. Like, I really need it. This one got 4 stars because I love this story. I really do. My notes on this says, duo POVs, one more interesting than the other. Excited for the third book. Trigger warnings for cutting because there is blood magic in the story. Yeah, I really love the first book in this series, and the second book literally follows on from that first book. So I did have to kind of go back and just read sort of like the last chapter or so of The Seventh Son before I picked this up, just to like recover what happened at the end of the first book so I could go straight into this one. I didn't have to reread the first book, but I did have to kind of remind myself how it ended. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. As I say, there are 2 point of views, so there are 2 stories happening at the same time. One is happening in the underworld and rising through the 9, 7, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sort of things of hell kind of thing, of the underworld. And then the other one is happening above, on Earth, as normal Earth. And yeah, I say I preferred one over the other. There was one storyline that had a bit better romance. Dare I say. Look, I just love romance in my books, okay? I love seeing a love story, okay? That's my jam. But the story of the couple that was underground, they did like each other. They were the 2 people in stories. You know, you always get them where they like each other, but they will not admit it. Or they won't let themselves fall in love because they're too busy trying to do other things. And that just frustrates me. But yeah, whereas the romance above ground was a lot more passionate, shall we say. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I cannot wait for book 3 to come out. I do hope that my local Waterstones can grab it for me. These books are just stunning. The first book, The Seventh Son, has beautiful artwork on the front as well. And I cannot wait to see what the artwork for Obsidian Butterfly is. Because, yeah, I love this. Yeah, I really did. I enjoyed it. Okay, and my last book that I read in January, and it took me, I think I finished 2 or 3 books in the time that it took me to read this one. It is the Bane Chronicles. I did it. I finally did it. Written by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Rees-Brennan and Maureen Johnson. I gave this one 2 stars. It's probably a bit harsh, okay? No, 2 stars. Kind of pointless. Didn't add much to the overall storyline of the Shadowhunters. Yeah. Magnus Bane is one of those characters who's flamboyant and crazy and wild, and he's a warlock who loves his grandeur and loves his elegance and flamboyancy. And this was lots of short stories about events that had happened in his past, people that he'd met, adventures that he'd been on, but I just didn't feel like I needed to know any of that to fall in love with his character anymore. It didn't add anything to the overall arcing story of the Shadowhunters to me. I feel like you could read the Shadowhunter series, the Mortal Instruments, the Dark Artifices, which I haven't read yet, and the Infernal Devices, which I have read. I've read the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments. I feel like you can read those without having to read this to understand Magnus Bane's character more. So yeah, it was kind of pointless. Like, you don't need to read this book. You don't need to read it in order to enjoy the series that are in the Shadowhunter books. And there's a lot of Shadowhunter books. So to add extra books that don't really add anything more to the story, in my opinion, and this is all just my opinion. If you feel differently, then obviously that's fine. But for me, like, do I need it? Nope. Will it stay on my shelves because it's part of the collection? Of course it will. I'm a collector of books as much as a reader. So yeah, that was all the books that I read in January. So let's get on to those stats. So if you were counting up, you will have seen that I read a total of 14 books. The physical pages I read, so books that I read physically, were 2,981. I read 544 pages of ebooks. I listened to 36 hours and 46 minutes worth of audiobooks that I physically own a copy of, and I listened to 0 hours of books that I borrowed. So that annoys me a little because I need to know that I'm using my Scribd and Audible services, subscriptions, to be listening to books that I don't own as much as books that I do own, because then I feel like I'm getting my money's worth. The ratings of the books, 3 were 5 stars, 5 were 4 stars, 3 were 3 stars, 3 were 2 stars, and none were 1 stars, and I did not DNF a single book. The genres of the books I read: no thrillers, no contemporaries, are we surprised? I read 2 classics, 1 middle grade, 2 mangas and graphic novels, 1 non-fiction, and 8 fantasy books. I was in a fantasy mood at the end of the month. The origins of the books, 12 were physically owned by me and 2 were borrowed. Those were the 2 ebooks. The format of the way that I read my books, I read 9 physically, 3 audibly, and 2 ebookly. The bindings of the books, 7 were hardback and 5 were paperback. I did include the books that I physically own, but I listened to them audibly. So that's why that number doesn't quite add up to the 9 of the physical books. It equals the physical and the audiobooks of the books that I own. Anyway, the gender, 3 authors were male, 11 were female, and 3 of the authors identified as LGBTQ. Now we go on to some of the extra statistics that I'm taking this year. The longest book I read was actually one of the ebooks, and that was, of course, Gilded. It wasn't going to be The Lost Sister. And in fact, that was at 512 pages. And the shortest one was the other ebook, The Lost Sisters, at 32 pages. The oldest book I read, so the book that was written the longest ago, English, was Little Women, and that was written in 1868. The newest book was, of course, Thunder of Monsters, which came out in January 2022. The highest rated was, funnily enough, A Thunder of Monsters at 4.85. Now, I will say it only had, I think it was about less than 20 reviews on Goodreads, but it still had the highest rating. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what I'm going with. There was another book that did have almost as high a rating with many more thousands of reviews, And you could say that technically that would be the highest rated. But A Thunder of Monsters was the highest rated on Goodreads, no matter how many people had reviewed it. So I went with that one. And the lowest rated was The Lost Sisters, which came in at 3.51 stars on Goodreads. The worst book was, of course, for me, The Lost Sisters. It just felt so pointless. 32 pages of nothing, really. I did debate putting the Bane Chronicles in there, and I did also debate putting the Dr. Doolittle in there. But when I really thought about it, Dr. Doolittle is just a product of its time. I can't hate it for that. And the Bane Chronicles, I did enjoy some of it. It wasn't all mundane, to use a word in the Shadowhunter world. But it wasn't as bad as The Lost. It wasn't as pointless as The Lost Sisters. And the best book, sorry, but it's The Thunder of Monsters again. So most of my statistics was about The Thunder of Monsters or The Lost Sisters. So that was the statistics for the month. So that is it. That is all the books that I read in January. What did you read in January? Did you read any of these books? Did you think the same thing as me? Have you read any of these books before and have different opinions to me? Let's chat about it in the comments section down below. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.